Good afternoon, everyone. It is Wednesday, October the 21st, 2020. It is currently 4:32 p.m. Central Time. I'm back live on the air. Yes, it appears the internet is now working here at Victory Baptist Church in the middle of nowhere, Texas. I hope they've gotten everything fixed. I hope everything is good to go because we have a lot to talk about. We have a lot of things to talk about, and wow, I don't even know where to begin. This day has gone in so many weird directions that I'm still trying to figure it all out. And so I hope that this works out fine. I hope this works out fine. And I apologize for sounding distracted because I'm looking at a number of things here, trying to figure out exactly how to approach all of this because we have so many things to talk about. Even in writing the title for this episode, I was trying to figure out, what do I do? And I left out commas. I know it's not punctuated correctly. The reason I do that is because sometimes Spotify, if you put commas and different things, for some reason, it won't recognize the episode, so it won't show up. So you just kind of have to put it all run together, and hopefully everyone will get the idea of what we're going to be talking about. But it's been a crazy day. It's been a crazy day. And when I arrived here at the church this morning, I thought I was going to do one episode about it, and then I would just be able to move on, do 3-4 hours of live broadcasting about other things, and then maybe tomorrow, maybe Friday, return to the original story that I reported on this morning, add some additional commentary, listen to what some other people are saying. But wow. I reported on it, and the next thing you know, just boom, I was being hit with comments from every direction. I was being attacked for things that anyone who knows me, the attacks were clearly from people who have no idea who they were talking to or who they were commenting about. They hadn't bothered to go listen to anything that I've ever talked about. It was just crazy attacks. It's been an absolutely crazy day. So what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to slow everything down. We're going to try to do a quick review of what has happened, and we're going to talk about a lot of these comments. We're going to struggle with a number of issues, and I hope everyone will actually listen to what I'm saying. So many times, it's such a 2020 thing. You post something, like you post a podcast episode, and you know that some of the people commenting, you know that they have not even bothered to actually listen to what you said. And here's how you know. You post a 52-minute podcast episode, right? You post it at, say, 12 p.m., and at 12:20, there's already comments. Well, how can there already be comments in 20 minutes if your episode is 52 minutes? I mean, that means in many cases, they're not even listening. They just see the headline and then boom, start throwing out comments. They didn't even bother to listen to my what I had to say, my perspective. And too many times in at least from my experience, too many times people see one of my, podcast episode titles and then just start commenting. And then when I point out, if you would have actually listened to what I said, it's not, has nothing to do with what you're commenting. In fact, you're attacking me for something I didn't even say and from a position I don't even hold. Did you actually listen? And then they'll usually about 90% of the time, they won't even respond. One time someone responded, well, I was listening, but then you got too loud and I got a headache, so I stopped listening. Well, if you stopped listening, then why did you comment? Right? So, but typically they just don't even respond. Every once in a while, someone will say, I am so sorry. I went back and listened. I thought you were going in a different direction. I thought you were going to say these words, and I just started attacking. And I'm like, okay, well, actually listen to me, and you'll see that I try to be very fair, try to be very balanced. I try to look at different perspectives. And so you may disagree, but you need at least to listen to everything I have to say. So I'm going to ask you right here from the start, please listen to everything I have to say here. All right. We have a lot to try to work on. All right. Here's how everything started. This morning, I get a news notification on my iPad about Pope Francis basically supporting same-sex civil unions, right? And I was like, oh boy, this is going to be a big deal. So I immediately stopped everything I was doing, packed all of my podcast equipment, got in my car, drove here to the church as fast as I could. I ran in with books, the laptop. I hooked everything up, and I went live. I went live before I was even ready to actually go live. I was still trying to get things ready. In fact, I was such in a hurry to go live because as soon as I saw the news story break, I'm like, okay, timing is everything here. I need to get ahead of this story. I don't want to be talking about it 3 days after the fact. I need to talk about it right now. I was in such a hurry that I left the door to my car open. It was sitting in the church parking lot with the door wide. In fact, 2 doors were wide open. The passenger side where I had some of my equipment, the driver's side, I didn't even bother to shut that. And so I was in here doing live broadcasting with my car doors wide open in the church parking lot because I was in a hurry to try to address this and try. And I if you remember what I said, if you listen to those episodes, I wanted us to avoid blowing it out of proportion, but at the same time, I wanted us to avoid just ignoring it. We needed a biblical balance, and that's what I tried to provide. What is frustrating is I made it about 32 minutes into the first live broadcast, and the internet went down. So I regrouped, tried to, gain some composure, sat back down behind the microphone, went live, made it 52 minutes, and the internet went down. All right. So I did 2 live broadcasts, and both of them resulted in the internet going down. I deleted the first one. The second one, I just left there because I couldn't believe it. And I did not want to do a third. I did do a quick live broadcast when the internet came back up to say, hey, we're having some technical problems. So I went home. And by the time I got home, in fact, before I even got home, in fact, as soon as I started packing up, I started looking and I was getting all kinds of comments and notifications from people going, calling. I mean, I was being attacked. It was just crazy. I'm like, what is going on? So by the time I got home, I was like, this whole situation is spiraling out of control. This is not what I wanted to do. So now I feel like here I am. I've made it back to the church. The internet's working. And guess what we have to do? We got to talk about all of this. All right. So we're going to do our best. So let me give you the original headline. The original headline, I got it right here. And the original story came to me from the Associated Press. All right. The Associated Press. Let me just remind you, the Associated Press app is opening. Give me 1 second. Here we go. I get nervous. Well, now it links to the original story. It looks like has been changed. That's interesting. This is now 4 minutes ago, according to the Associated Press app. This was posted 4 minutes ago. So they've updated the story. Francis becomes first pope to endorse same-sex civil unions. He becomes the first pope to ever do this. And I've got Catholics saying it's no big deal. It's no big deal. His words are being taken out of context, okay? But all the news articles are like, so they're all thinking it's a liberal news media plot to misrepresent the Pope. I just want to make sure I remind everyone, the Pope can clarify this in 3 seconds, all right? I'm here in the middle of nowhere, Texas, with a bad internet connection, and I can go live on the air. This is the 4th time today I've been live on the air. I'm pretty sure that the Vatican has resources that far surpass what I have. So Pope Francis could go live at any moment and say, let me clarify, but I don't think he's going to do that. So this is what this story says. Francis becomes first pope to endorse same-sex civil unions. Pope Francis becomes the first pontiff to endorse same-sex civil unions and comments for a documentary that premiered Wednesday, sparking cheers from gay Catholics and demands for clarification from conservatives, given the Vatican's official teaching on the issue. The papal thumbs up comes midway through the feature-length documentary Francesco, which premiered at the Rome Film Festival. The film, which features fresh interviews with the Pope, delves into issues Francis cares about most, including the environment, poverty, migration, racial and income inequality, and the people most affected by discrimination. As I said earlier, the most important issues to him should be theology, doctrine, scripture. Those should be the most important issues. And then those issues, doctrine, the Bible, theology, church teaching, church, if you want to go, look at it from a Catholic perspective, Catholic tradition, church tradition, et cetera, and then how those facts, those perspectives relate to then things that he listed there: environment, poverty, et cetera. But he seems to be far more interested in these other things than he is in the Bible and doctrine and church history. So, and I think that's fair to say. And then here's some of the quotes that he had. Homosexual people have the right to be in a family. They are children of God, Francis said. You can't kick someone out of the family nor make their life miserable for this. What we have to have is a civil union law that way they are legally covered. All right. Now, I'm not going to go back and give all of my analysis on all the comments. You can go listen to the previous episode, which is 52 minutes long and then ends abruptly. If you have any questions in regards to what I said there, please contact me, and I will offer any clarification that I can. All right. But here's what we need to do. All right. And I want to put your thinking caps on, because here's what I do. When people attack me, when people send, hurtful, mean comments, even though what I try to do is overlook any of the personal attacks, any of the condescending, smart aleck remarks. I try to overlook that and try to get to the very heart of their issue. Because sometimes, even though they may dress it up and mean just unnecessary language, sometimes they make a valid point. And some individuals were making, I think, a really valid point that you and I, as Christians, obviously I'm not a Catholic. Obviously I reject Catholicism. I believe, I disagree with so many of their teachings, especially I believe they have a false gospel when you come down to it. Their gospel is not the same as the gospel that I teach. So I reject Catholicism. Let's just get that out of the way. But these comments that people were making really go to anyone who claims to be a Christian. Whether if you claim Catholicism is Christianity, Orthodox, it doesn't matter, Protestant, whatever the case may be, anyone who claims to be a Christian. These questions and comments really, 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 really went to the heart of an issue that has bothered me for a very long time. And they, for some reason, thought that they obviously have never listened to me, because if you've listened to me, you know these issues they've bothered me pretty much my whole Christian life. And I've spoken about them a number of times, but because this is such a controversial issue and so many people are talking about it, we have to deal with these issues. And I want you to listen to what I'm about to say, all right? Now listen to me carefully, all right? This right now, this goes beyond Pope Francis. This goes way beyond same-sex civil unions. This goes way beyond your opinion in regards to these issues. This goes to the issue of Christians undermining our moral authority because of inconsistency in how we apply biblical morality. Christians have a tendency to undermine any moral authority they claim for themselves because they are inconsistent in how they apply biblical morality. We apply a biblical morality in one situation, and we literally undermine that biblical morality because of our inconsistency in how we apply it. We apply it one way in one situation, and we do basically the opposite in a different situation. And whenever you point this out, Christians get upset with me. And let me make it very clear. I've stated it before and I'll state it again. When it comes to the world, whatever they want to do with gay marriage, leave it outside the church, do whatever you want. But the church has to take a stand for biblical morality and say that's not a marriage and homosexuality is a sin. That's what we have to do. I don't care what the government does or doesn't do. That's irrelevant to me, okay? You know how I feel about the political hijacking of the church. The church has a spiritual and a biblical perspective, and that's what we are to maintain, no matter what the world does outside the church, all right? So, but when it comes to how the church handles these moral issues, that sometimes these moral issues are raised because what the culture is doing, sometimes we're very inconsistent in how this comes about. So I'm going to give you an example of one comment that I received. All right. And I want you to really think about this because boom, I mean, they start throwing punches to the face. And I will say rightly so. I think all of us as Christians, we deserve some of these punches to the face because of our inconsistency. All right. So here we go. I'm going to pull this up. This comment came to us via the YouTube page. Let me pull this up. Hopefully I can get to it. Give me 1 second. Here we go. Here we are. This comes from someone, James B. 7777. James B. 777. This was posted 3 hours ago. All right. Here's what the person said. So do you reject Donald Trump? Now, I stop right there. Why would they even ask me that question? Anyone who knows me knows that I'm not a Donald Trump supporter. Anyone who knows me knows I hate the political hijacking of the church. To be honest, I don't support any political party because I think all the political parties are in it for themselves. They use Christians for their own advancement and their own power and their own position. They just use us, and the church allows itself to be used. We almost prostitute ourselves out for politicians to get what they want, and I hate the political hijacking of the church. So already clearly the person has never listened to me, but just stay with me. So do you reject Donald Trump and people in your church who are living in adultery through second and third marriages? Do you believe Trump is anointed by God and is saved? Now, okay. This brings together, like this person is just like, he threw like a 3-punch combination. It was like boom, 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 boom. I mean, well, I'm doing more than 3 punches. It was more than a 3-punch combination. I mean, he was throwing punches and kicks, right? And guess what? The church deserves to take all of these punches and kicks. This person has every right to ask these questions. I just think he's asking the wrong person because if he knows me, knows I've struggled with, I do not understand Christianity's obsession. So many Christians within the evangelical world, their obsession and their support for Donald Trump almost like he's our savior. I don't get it. I don't understand it. It's bizarre to me. And the world has been asking these questions like, wait a minute. You are the ones running around going, character matters when it comes to Bill Clinton, or if anyone, character matters. And if a politician on the left did anything immoral, we would condemn it and say that's ungodly. And we need godliness in the White House, and we need morality in the White House. And then all of a sudden with Donald Trump, it's like, hey, it doesn't matter. And there's been lots of articles written going, hey, Christians, you're hurting yourselves. You're undermining your moral authority by turning your head and looking the other direction over all of Donald Trump's moral issues. You're undermining your moral authority. You're looking like you're selling out simply for political power and political gain. And you're undermining biblical morality because you want a certain person in the White House. And a lot of people have written articles in regards to this. So what happens? Pope Francis comes along and says, hey, we need same-sex civil unions. And I say, biblically, that is wrong. Biblically, that is wrong as far as if to be fair, I didn't even say that was wrong in this sense. Again, I don't care what the government does. My question is, wait, Pope Francis, what are you saying about how the church should respond to this? Are you saying the church has to accept these unions as being somehow blessed and sanctioned by God, and that we allow people to be in a homosexual relationship and continue to engage in a homosexual physical relationship, and we do not condemn it, and we do not call it sin, and do we not call people to repent? That's my issue, right? That's my issue. I don't care what the world does. How does the church handle this? So what this person is saying is, hey, Christians, you can't run around condemning homosexuality and calling for a biblical morality in regards to homosexuality to be applied if you're not willing to apply any form of biblical morality when it comes to issues like Donald Trump or divorce and remarriage. And you know what? That's a legitimate question. We can't get on our high horses about morality for one situation and then ignore it in another situation. Now, I will argue that no matter who you vote for as a politician, you're voting for people in many cases who are obviously either just straight up lie or who have enough skeletons in their closet that if you open it up, it's horrible. But what we have to do is make sure that we don't somehow overlook or act like we're okay with one person's immorality while we're condemning another person's immorality. We have to be consistent in calling sin, sin. And sin is sin no matter who commits it. If it's someone on the left commits it, it's sin. If someone on the right commits it, it's sin. If it's us in the church, it's sin. We have to at least be consistent in our condemnation of sin. We can't just use the condemnation of sin only when it fits our political agenda. We cannot do that. So I think that they have every right to raise that question, but they raised the question, all right? So there's the political thing, and we've talked about that a million times. They raised the big question, and I have raised it so many times, and I've yet to get a decent answer from anyone within Christendom. Every church, probably in America, with probably very few exceptions, I don't care how big the church is. I don't care how small the church is. You have members of your church who have been divorced and who have been remarried. And the biblical idea in most of these situations, I know there's the supposed exception clause, but even if you allow for the exception clause, does the exception clause then allow for remarriage? Okay, so we're getting ready to go to Romans chapter 7 at some point in our teaching in Romans. And I've paused that because I don't know what to do with Romans chapter 7 because it raises these very important issues about divorce and remarriage. But every church has divorced and remarried people in those churches. And the biblical position is that those who are divorced and who are remarried and the spouses are still alive have entered into an adulterous relationship. Therefore, they are committing adultery anytime they engage in a physical relationship. Now, this is traditionally what the church does. Well, your divorce was wrong. There's nothing you can do about it now. So just carry on, live out your Christian life, enjoy your marriage, enjoy one another. You're free to engage in physical relationship. You're okay. While we're doing that, we look at anyone else in the church and go, hey, you teenagers, if you engage in fornication, you're going to get church discipline. Hey, you, if you commit adultery, you're going to get church discipline. Hey, you. So see, we're going after everyone else for their sexual immorality. Hey, you got caught looking at pornography. We're going to have to deal with you. While you literally have people in your church who are engaged, if we understand the biblical teaching correctly, in adultery, but we don't do anything about it. So this person is saying, well, wait a minute. If you're going to condemn same-sex civil unions, right? And you're going to say, hey, homosexuals, you can't, if you are in a same-sex civil union and you come into the church, you have to abstain from physical relationship, and we're not going to recognize that as a union acceptable unto God. If you're going to apply biblical morality to the homosexual and their civil union, then you've got to apply biblical morality to the people who are divorced and remarriage. And if you don't do it for one, you can't do it for the other. Now that is a legitimate criticism. That is a legitimate point to be made. And again, I'm not making the point. Someone on YouTube made this point, and they were throwing their boom, 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 their combination. And you know what? I applaud them for it. Now, they clearly don't know that I've talked about these issues a million times. I've talked about our inconsistencies here. And here's part of the problem. And I've stated it a million times. The Bible is great at saying, thou shalt not do this. Do not do this. Abstain from this. This is sin. This is wrong. The Bible is not so great at saying, once you've done this, now here are the 10 steps you have to do to fix it. Here's how you resolve the matter. Here's how you fix the matter. Here's how. Now, of course, there's one good thing. Obviously, based on our understanding of salvation, not the Catholic understanding, but our understanding is that our salvation is by grace alone, through faith alone, because of Christ alone. Because of God's grace, he sent his son, Jesus Christ. And if I place my faith in Jesus Christ and his finished work on the cross, my salvation is secure and dependent upon the imputed righteousness of Christ, his righteousness accredited to my account. And I'm obviously going to fall short. I'm going to sin. I'm going to sin in 100 different ways. And that sin doesn't impact my salvation, right? Because my salvation is dependent upon the finished work of Jesus Christ. However, even though my salvation is not dependent upon that, I'm still called to try to live out a godly life. I'm not to just continue in sin that grace may abound. God forbid, as Paul says in Romans. So how do we live these situations out? What do we do? What do we do? Now, the standard view within the evangelical Christian world, if it's two homosexuals who come into the church, we say, look, you maybe have a civil union. We don't recognize that as a biblical marriage. The Bible would define marriage between a man and a woman, all right? And we would say between a man and a woman for life, that once you're married, you're to be married until death do you part. No man is to put asunder what God has put together. That's the basic concept. And so therefore, we're not going to recognize that as a marriage. And what you have to do is now abstain from physical relations with your partner. You can no longer engage in that because that is a sexual immorality according to the Bible. God in his word does not approve of that sexual behavior, just like he does not approve of fornication, sex before marriage, just like he does not approve of sex with someone other than your spouse, in other words, adultery. There's all these different forms of biblical morality when it comes to sex. He does not approve, obviously, of looking at a woman with lust, if you're because that's basically adultery. Even if you haven't touched the woman, you've committed adultery. So the thing is, everyone in the church is guilty of all kinds of sexual immorality. And when we're guilty of it, obviously there has to be confrontation, there has to be repentance, there has to be forgiveness, and there has to be hopefully trying to restore people back to a place of usefulness. We don't just ignore it. But here's the thing. We call the homosexuals to abstain. We tell the singles to abstain. We tell married people, hey, you can't abstain from sexual relations with anyone other than your spouse. So we have abstain, 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 abstain. But we have people who are divorced and remarried, and we say, do not abstain. Carry it out, even though the Bible seems to infer that it's adultery. Now, there's a couple of ways of trying to work through this that the church has thrown out. First, there have been those, even the Catholic Church says they are to abstain. The divorce and remarriage are to abstain. Protestants have rejected that idea. So if you reject that idea, then how do you resolve it? Well, then this is how Protestants typically try to resolve it. Well, divorce and remarriage is allowed if they say if adultery has occurred. So if you were married and your spouse committed adultery, right? And then you got remarried, supposedly you're good to go. So I get so from many Protestant churches, this is the way it works. If you have two people and both people are divorced, right? And both of them were divorced because their spouse has committed adultery, then they are free to engage in normal marital relations, right? That's how some Protestants look at it. But wait, there's all kinds of things we have to consider. So what if one is divorced, okay, they get remarried, but the other person has never been divorced, but they're marrying a divorced person. Well, if the other person got divorced and supposedly their spouse committed adultery, then that's perfectly okay. So it really comes down to the way some Protestants look at this. You get divorced, and it's because of adultery, even though the text says because of fornication, but they ignore that. That's okay. It doesn't even use the word adultery. It uses the word porneia, and the exception clause is found in Matthew. I don't know why everyone ignores that. It doesn't say, it says except for fornication. Why? Because the exception clause probably refers to the betrothal period, because the betrothal period in biblical times was almost seen as a legal binding agreement. But if someone was found to have committed sexual immorality during the betrothal period, you could put the person away. All right. But we now move it from the betrothal period to the marriage. So let's go with this idea. All right. So if someone gets married and then they get divorced, and if they get divorced because their spouse committed adultery, according to many Protestant churches, they're absolutely free to get remarried, and they're absolutely free to then and carry out marital relations in a normal way. All right. Now, here's a couple of issues with that. Number one, does the church ever try to find out for sure if that's the reason they got divorced? Do we ever try to, do we go, do we just take your word for it? Okay, your spouse committed adultery. You're free to go. You're good to go. Look, do we even ask? Do we? I would assume that we don't even ask the question. We're just like, okay, all right, that's fine. That's fine. You're good to go. But here's the thing. I guarantee you that in probably 70 to 80% of churches, you have people who are divorced and remarried, and some of those divorced and remarried people, they don't even meet the qualifications for the exception clause, even if you interpret the exception clause as allowing for divorce and remarriage in case of adultery. They don't even meet the qualifications for that. Their marriage wasn't because of adultery. And they'll try to find another reason to justify it. Basically, the Protestant church has abandoned 100% any desire to try to go, how do we handle this biblically, the people who are divorced and remarried? We've abandoned that. And we're saying, well, it's too mean, it's too cruel, it's not fair, no one should have to suffer, so they shouldn't have to suffer. Well, okay, so we throw that out. But at the same time, we're looking at the single people going, hey, you may be 24, you're not married. I'm sorry, you cannot engage in physical relations with anyone. You have to abstain. Hey, I know you're a homosexual. Sorry, you can't engage in homosexuality for the rest of your life. You're done. You're finished. You have to abstain. So we got no problem putting the rules on everyone else, but the church has pretty much abandoned even struggling with these issues when it comes to divorce and remarriage. And there are people now going, wait a minute, you can't do it. You can't have it both ways. And that is a fair argument. It is a fair argument. Do we hold some standard for those in the homosexual LGBTQ world? Do we hold some standard towards them that we're not even fairly handing out to people in other situations? If you're in a homosexual marriage, abstain from physical relations. Abstain. If you're divorced and remarried, you do not have to abstain, even though the Bible refers to that as adultery. We have to find a way to be consistent here. And I was going to grab my Bible, but it's up at the front of the church. You can look at Romans chapter 7, because this is where we come to. And it's basically like, look, if your spouse is still alive and you marry another, it's adultery. Okay? Well, we're like, no. We got the exception clause in Matthew, even though the other gospels don't repeat that exception clause. And Matthew is the gospel that refers to Joseph getting ready to put away Mary, because Mary seemed to engaged from what he can perceive. She's pregnant. They're not yet married. They're engaged. Well, now he can put her away, which seems to be what the exception clause refers to. But even if you go with a different interpretation, that's okay. What do you do for the people who don't meet the exception clause? What do you do? Now, if you say, well, it's completely different. Heterosexual divorce and remarriage is completely different from those in a homosexual relationship. It's completely different. Yeah, it's completely different because it's not your sin. It's completely different because it's a sin that you don't like. It's a sin that you think is disgusting. It's a sin that you think is unnatural. It's a sin that you can't even comprehend engaging in. So clearly it's different. But it's still a sin. You're still dealing with people struggling. So this raises very uncomfortable questions. And I've received a number of like comments that basically said, you Christians are hypocrites. You allow divorce and remarriage whenever you want it, but you condemn the homosexual. And we've got to be honest. There was a time the church had a far different stance on divorce and remarriage than it does in 2020. The culture changed and the church changed with it. I don't know what you should do. I don't know how you move forward. But I just know that while we're trying to deal with homosexuality and civil unions and all the things happening in culture, we've got to make sure we are at least consistent. We've got to think these things through. And this is one of the reasons I haven't moved on with Romans chapter 7, because the reality of Romans 7, Paul is only using the illustration of divorce, remarriage. He's only using that as an illustration about our relationship to the law, right? So he's not really there to talk about divorce. He's really to talk about the believer's relationship to the law. But he bases it on a certain system of morality as it pertains to divorce and remarriage. And he states that morality in very clear terms. So that comment really got my attention. And I'm like, you know what? There's some truth there. So here's, I'm going to give you what I believe to be, I'm going to try to be as biblical here as I can. All right. I'm going to try to be as biblical here as I can. I don't care. I'm going to state it again. I don't care if the government passed a law right now, today, saying same-sex marriage, polygamous marriage. I don't care. They can let people marry their dog. I could care less. And I know what Christians say. Oh, that's destroying the sanctity of marriage. We can't let the culture destroy the sanctity of marriage. I think we all as Christians have to look in the mirror of what we've done to the sanctity of marriage. How widespread is divorce in the church? How widespread is sexual immorality in the church? How widespread is adultery in the church? We've got our own issues before we start pointing our fingers at the world. We've got to look to ourselves. So let me make it clear. I don't care. Gay marriage is legal. It's irrelevant. But the church has a position that we have to stand, and which is, the biblical position is, that's not marriage from a biblical perspective. And again, civil union's one thing. Marriage for a Christian is two people coming together making a covenant before God. That's different. It's completely different. Marriage should be in the church, should be done by the church for Christians, right? A Christian should marry a Christian. That's the way it's supposed to be, and it should be a church thing. We've turned it into some big Disney romance thing with this gigantic wedding, and let's do it at this special spot where it looks wonderful. It should just be it should just basically be a part of a church service. Is what it should be. And two individuals come together before their church and say, we because we love one another, we are coming together before God to make a commitment to one another before God and to all of you members of this church, that we're joining in marriage as a husband and a wife until death do us part, and what God has put together, let no man put asunder. It should just really be a religious service. We should get away from all of the other trappings that the culture has sold to us. So I don't care what happens outside the church. So if someone walks into the church and they are in a same-sex civil union, congratulations, the government recognizes your union. The church cannot recognize that union because it's not biblical marriage. And your relationship, your homosexual relationship, we can't recognize that relationship as being correct biblically, because the Bible says that type of sexual relationship is immoral and wrong, and you must repent and abstain from it. But it's just as immoral as two heterosexual teenagers engaging in premarital sex. It's just as wrong as a married person in the church engaged in physical relations with another person other than their spouse. That's adultery. It's just as wrong. And we'll do everything we can to help you struggle with that sin, hold you accountable, and hopefully allow you to have spiritual victory over that, but you can't engage in it. Now, so that's the position we have to have. Now, when it comes to those who are divorced and remarried, I don't have the answer. If you look, I'm telling you as a pastor, if you stand up behind the pulpit and say, hey, those of you who are divorced and remarried, you have to abstain, they're going to look at you like you've lost your mind. They're going to look at you like you've lost your mind. They're either going to throw out the exception clause, but even those who don't meet the exception clause qualifications, even if you go with that interpretation, they're still going to look at you like you're crazy. And you know what you're going to hear? God wouldn't want us to be unhappy. God wouldn't want me to deprive myself. God wouldn't want to put me in a position where I would be tempted, because if I have to abstain, I'm going to be tempted. Well, what do you think about the young people who have to abstain? Aren't they going to be tempted? What do you think about the homosexual who has to abstain? Are they not going to be tempted? Because if you think you become a Christian and magically homosexual desires just magically disappear, it doesn't typically work that way. Just like a heterosexual becomes a Christian and their sexual desire does not magically disappear. So this subject really now has opened the door to all kinds of other issues. Like I didn't think it was going to go there today. I really didn't. I'm more trying to figure out, what is Pope Francis saying? Is he just saying, hey, the world should have same-sex unions, but the church, here's our stance? He's got to answer some questions. He's got to ask some clarification. I've read comment after comment from Catholics. A lot of Catholics are like, I don't get it. Most of the Catholics are simply saying, well, he didn't mean what it seems to say. He didn't mean that. He didn't mean that. He didn't mean that. Well, at some point, he's going to have to tell us what he means. I hope he does. But the real issue is, and I want you to get, I'm going to phrase the question this way. Have we, as Christians, undermined our moral authority because of inconsistent application of biblical morality? Have we undermined it? Have we undermined it by, hearing a tape of before President Trump became president, saying some pretty horrible things about women and grabbing women, and we just overlook it and say, well, that was back then and it's all good? Do we overlook all the other issues surrounding Trump? I heard all the excuses. Well, he's a baby Christian. We've tried to excuse it a million different ways. And then we have supposedly testimony that he was basically calling Christianity, idiots. Whether that's true or not true, it raises questions about, what's his true view on it? Have we undermined our moral authority by wanting to apply a moral authority to Bill Clinton, right? And saying character matters, and condemn him to the 18th level of hell for his immorality? But then for Trump, we're like, he's God's man, and we've got that. I've stated it so many times. One of the biggest issues that the church has, is that the church has never stopped to think our external, like you may vote for Trump as a Christian because you think, look, you don't have any other good option here. But I've stated it so many times. You don't go flaunt that to a world where all you do is you cause them to stumble. Paul in Corinthians says, look, if eating meat causes someone to stumble, you abstain from eating meat. The world doesn't understand how you can support someone who has been so outwardly immoral, says cruel and horrible things via his Twitter account, sometimes says things that no Christian in any world should support. When you're out there all pro-Trump, 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 they see you being pro-Trump and not pro-Jesus, and they don't see how being pro-Trump is consistent with being pro-Jesus. So we undermine our own biblical authority because we're like, you're just a hypocrite. You're pro-Jesus and you're supporting a man who's nothing like Jesus. So sometimes we should just be quiet in what we do politically, right? You're like, okay, I'm going to vote for this person because I've got two bad choices here. I'm just going to vote for this, but I'm not going to be out there making that the point, because my goal as a Christian is to be salt and light, not to cause confusion, not to create. Look, if people are going to reject Christianity, let them reject Christianity because our support of the Bible and the support of Jesus, not because of some political person we want to affiliate ourselves with. Because that political person, I believe this is about 90% true, most of those political people are simply using the church so that they can get elected and they can have a position and they can have power. I think we have to think about that. So when it comes to Trump, have we undermined our moral authority? And when it comes to how we handle homosexual same-sex unions, civil unions, and how we handle divorce and remarriage, have we undermined our own moral authority by being so radically inconsistent? Look, sometimes the church, we never bother to ask ourselves these questions. The church may not want to ask these questions, but the world is right there going, hey, wait a minute. The Bible seems to imply divorce and remarriage equals adultery. You've got a bunch of adulterers in your church and you accept it perfectly okay. So why can't two homosexuals be in your church in a relationship and engaging in a physical relationship? What's the difference? Someone else, let me see here. Someone else posted a similar comment. These were all the similar comments I got. So yeah, this person posted this. So I, as a Catholic woman, cannot be a priest despite my calling. And I'm also considered evil by the church because I use the mini pill to treat my, I don't know what exactly medical condition she's referring to, but two gays can live together and, let's see here, pull up the whole comment. But two gays can live together and adopt children, and the Pope is okay with that. Pope Francis is the Antichrist, and he cares more about gays than he does about godly women and godly families. See, so what he's saying is like, hey, if you're going to accept that, then why can't you accept a woman taking a birth control pill? Why can't you accept a woman as a priest? Why are there all these other rules, but you're going to somehow make an exception for this? Now, again, he may have just misspoke because he should have just said, what he should have said is, I don't care what the government does. The government can have same-sex marriage. Wonderful. But the church, we have to maintain a stance that a marriage is between a man and a woman for life. End of story. So everyone's pointing out the inconsistent. I can't do this, but hey, gays can do that. Well, guess what? There's a lot of people within the Protestant church who'd be like, wait a minute. I can't do this, but those two people over there who are divorced and remarried, they're living in adultery, they can do whatever they want. Why is there one rule for them and not a same rule for me? That's a question you have to figure out. And most churches don't even have a workable solution to this. Many churches have, not only do they support divorce and remarriage, in many cases they have a class for all the divorced people to go to so that they can meet another divorced person and possibly get remarried. And then the church will not only marry them, they bless and support the remarriage. I've asked these questions a million times, and I've told the story before. In the 1990s, I attended a Bible Institute at a lot in Oklahoma. And the person in the Bible Institute said, look, basically what the Bible says about divorce and remarriage, you should probably just rip it out of your Bible because there's no way to apply it in any meaningful way in your church or you're not going to have a church. And I'm like, wait, you're telling me basically to ignore what the Bible says because I can't have a church. And then you become a pastor and you realize how many of your people are divorced and remarried. And you're like, what do you do here? If you even hint at saying, hey, I think we got a problem here. Everybody looks at you like, no, we don't. Because if we have a problem here, I'm walking out the door and going somewhere else where they don't have a problem with it. Well, the issue isn't does the church have a problem with it? The issue is, how do you justify it biblically? The best you have is the exception clause. Well, if you say you're good to go, then you're good to go because you claim that you're good to go. Well, what about the people who, quote unquote, don't meet the exception clause qualifications? Do you say they have to abstain? Will they? These are important issues. And so I wanted to turn the mic on just to tell the people who are emailing me, look, thank you. Just understand that I'm not the person, don't attack me with these issues because I've raised these issues literally my whole Christian life going, wait a minute, this is wrong, but that's not wrong? I don't understand. So these people are condemned, but these people aren't condemned. It doesn't seem to make any sense. We're so weird in how we apply it. And again, I will say the Bible does not do a great job in really articulating what do you do. Now, the woman caught in adultery, in John, I think it's John 8. I know there's lots of textual arguments about its place there and should it be there. Yeah, she's caught in adultery. Clearly, the people who brought her for a condemnation, they didn't care about truth because they just brought the woman. They didn't bring the man. So they didn't even care about immorality. They were just using the woman's immorality for their own agenda, which is sad that a lot of people do that. But they bring the woman, and what's Jesus say? Hey, those of you without sin, cast the first stone. And then he says, look, but listen, hey, where are your accusers? I don't accuse you either. Go and sin no more. So even though there was compassion, forgiveness, and mercy, there's still a call to go and sin no more. And so sometimes that's all we can say is, look, we can't fix what we've done in the past, but go and sin no more. Okay, well, what does that mean, go and sin no more? Well, for those in a civil union, we would say it means same-sex civil union is, hey, you can't engage in that immorality. Go and sin no more. To heterosexuals who are not married, who engage in premarital sex, we'd say, we forgive you. Go and sin no more. You've got to abstain. To someone who's committed adultery, we would say, hey, you got to repent of that. Go and sin no more. But what do we say to those who are divorced and remarriage, which puts them, again, I'm not even here to argue whether the exception clause should or shouldn't apply. But for many, it places them in a position of they're in an adulterous relationship. Do we not tell them to go and sin no more? I had no idea this is where the conversation was going to go today. I was more worried about, hey, I need Catholics to tell me, how does this impact the Catholic Church? What is Pope Francis saying about the church? And I'm just being told by most Catholics, just ignore it. It doesn't really mean what it says. It's no big deal. Well, I think but there are a lot of Catholics who believe it's a big deal. I read earlier all those comments from Catholics saying they're going to leave the church. I don't know if they're going to actually leave the church. I don't know if it's true, but if people start abandoning the church, the Catholic Church is going to have to clarify itself. So this is a big story, and it raises this issue. And I know it's uncomfortable. I don't like talking about it because you make people mad. But we don't. I just think sometimes we're so insensitive. To a homosexual, we don't care if we make them mad. We don't care if we offend them. Get over it. But for all of our sexual immorality issues, we're like, we need some compassion, and we've got to, we got to do this, and how do we deal with those who are homosexual? For most sexual immorality, what we tell people, stop doing it. Stop. You can't do that. Stop. Abstain. And abstain until you're married to someone of the opposite sex and a correct biblical marriage. Then you can engage in physical relations. That's how we tell everyone to handle themselves. But do we have a blind spot? Are we inconsistent? I don't know what the answer is. I don't know. But people are going to bring it up. So when you bring up same-sex civil unions, and then the church saying, wait a minute, you can do that outside the church, but inside the church, we can't accept that. We can't recognize that. It's not a biblical marriage. Everyone gets all upset with you. And then they hit us with Trump and divorce and remarriage. And the church has done that to themselves because we should have been the one dealing with these issues for a long time. We should have been like, hey guys, this whole Trump thing, you may have voted for him, but you probably don't want to be known for being the Trump supporter. You want to be known for being a Jesus supporter. You want to be a supporter of Scripture. That's what you want to be known for. So you probably should just stop going out there causing people to stumble, right? Because that's the biblical mandate. Don't do anything that causes someone to stumble, right? But nobody would listen. Nobody would listen. And so now people are looking at us like you're inconsistent, you're hypocrites. And the whole divorce, remarriage thing, people should have been dealing with this issue for a long time, struggling with this. But if you bring it up, people just say you're unloving, You're not compassionate. Well, so I've got to be loving and compassionate to the divorced remarried person. Well, why am I not compassionate to the 17-year-olds who are struggling with all the things going on in their body and this desire that they want to engage in a physical relationship? And I'm just supposed to say, I don't care. You abstain and you have a chaperone and you do everything. And if you do, I don't care about their feelings. So certain people's sins, they deserve mercy, compassion, and other people's sins deserve no mercy and compassion. For the homosexual, get over it. We're almost no compassion there. And I can't understand that, or I can't understand that desire. How about the person who's addicted to pornography? Do they not deserve mercy? These are difficult issues, and Christians have to be, as the culture moves further and further and further away from biblical morality, how we deal with these issues it's going to become absolutely critical that we are consistent in thinking these things through. And that while we're throwing the stone at that, we got to be looking over here at the thing we're not throwing the stone at. Because once we throw that stone, they're going to pick it up and throw it back at us and go, wait, what about that over there? You didn't bother to look at it. We don't want that. All right. Yes. Yeah, I know this is going to be controversial. And since this is going to even create more comments, I could sit here and read all the comments to you. I got some wonderful ones. Let me read some of these to you. Some of them are almost comical. Hang on, I'm getting more comments coming in. The comments are coming in. Some are saying what Pope Francis did. The false prophet is setting up the stage for the Antichrist. I saw a lot of that. But someone, this person said this, whomever is speaking sounds like an arrogant fool. Just be inclusive, you moron. Laugh out loud, idiot. Hey, now please note, be inclusive, you idiot, you moron. Hey, man. Be inclusive. Why would you call me an idiot and moron? Don't you accept? See, I love that. You're supposed to be inclusive of one thing, but they don't have to be inclusive of me. You don't have, you have no room to be inclusive to me, the one who I guess is the arrogant fool and the moron and the idiot. I love that. Be inclusive while while he comes across, and I'm assuming this person is male. I don't know. Well, this person is calling me names. How do people not see how inconsistent that is? All right. This person said, I'm proud of the Pope. Only hate-mongering swines will disagree with him. So if you disagree with what Pope Francis did, you are a hate-mongering swine. That sounds kind of hateful to call someone a hate-mongering swine. Calling people a pig. That sounds kind of hateful. It's weird. You condemn someone to being hateful while you're hateful. You condemn someone for not being inclusive while you're clearly not being inclusive. It's the world has lost its absolute mind today. And there's. Oh, and hang on. I got some other comments here. Give me a second. All right, here we go. Someone just posted. All right, I'm getting so many comments here. I'm trying to keep up with them. One second. Let me close this and try to reopen it. I'm getting so many comments coming in. I cannot keep up with them. All right, this person just posted. Okay, this person said, I just heard that Pope Francis endorsed same-sex civil unions. I looked it up on a Catholic news agency. Where in the documentary is the Pope quoted as saying? Where in the documentary? Okay, I thought they were asking it as a question. Let me read this again. I just heard that Pope Francis endorsed same-sex civil unions. I looked it up on Catholic news agency. Where in the documentary Francisco, the Pope is quoted as saying, homosexuals have a right to be a part of the family. They're children of God and have a right to a family. Nobody should be thrown out and be made miserable because of it. Pope Francis said in the film of his approach to pastoral care. Only those remarks and in comments likely to spark controversy among Catholics, Pope Francis weighed in directly on the issue of civil unions for same-sex couples. Then they quote, what we have to create is a civil union law. That way they are legally covered, the Pope said. I stood up for that. Now, the important thing to remember is that the Pope did not say this while presiding over an ecumenical council of the church, so papal infallibility was not invoked. Look, Catholics, please stop sending me that. I think that's just a cop-out. So the Pope can say anything as heretical as he wants, as long as he doesn't say it in an infallible way. But if he keeps saying it, doesn't that not begin to influence the thinking of Catholics and the practice of the church? Like, you still got to deal with the comments. All right? It says, still, this is a big, I'm assuming they mean big deal. Is there further news from the Vatican further explaining Pope's statements? Well, yeah, I doubt it. It says here, okay, this person, someone else sent in a comment, I think there is too much emphasis on chastity for gay people and not enough on chastity for all who are not in a marital relationship. Now, I agree. You got, if you're going to have chastity for gay people, you got to have chastity for everyone who are not in a proper relationship. And that's the point I'm making. Hang on, let me see here. Where was... That's not what I want. Here we go. Okay. Another person posted, my local news is covering this, and it's totally giving the wrong idea to people. So everyone is saying that the news media is giving a wrong idea, that Pope Francis didn't really say what he said. It's going to be interesting. The Vatican is going to have to release some kind of statement. And this is what Pope Francis seems to always do. Make a statement that's way over here. Say to the right. Okay. And when I say to the right, I'm not talking about political right or left. I'm just using it for illustrative purposes, just using right or left. He says something way far to the right that everyone is shocked and controversy erupts and everyone goes crazy. Then they release a statement that seems to backtrack it a little bit. But they've already thrown out the idea, which seems to be condition people that a little bit later he can come on and make another statement that's not quite as far to the right, just a little bit further to the right than the backtracked statement, and it moves the church in that direction. That seems to be his game. Throw out something crazy, then kind of retract, but then still move in that direction. But everyone's like, okay, good. They retracted a little bit. We're okay. I think you need to wake up and see which direction the Catholic Church is moving in. I think it's complete compromise. And I think unless the next pope takes it back in a different direction, I think the Catholic Church is going to be compromising in a lot of areas. That's where I think it's going. But the main point of all of this is we got to look to ourselves, and we got to ask if we've undermined our moral authority on some of these issues because of our inconsistent application of biblical morality in a number of other areas. I know it's tough. I know it makes everyone uncomfortable, but it has to be talked about, and we have to struggle with it. All right? I don't have the answers, but we have to struggle with it, and we have to figure out how we deal with this. All right? And you have to figure out what's the correct way to work it out. I'm not there to argue with you. I'm just willing to acknowledge the people who are bombarding me going, hey, you're inconsistent. You Christians are inconsistent. I agree we are. Now, as Christians, we can't expect the world to figure it out for us. We've got to be the one to sit down with the Bible and go, how do we work this out? How do we handle this? What's the correct way to do this? Let's be biblical. Let's be fair. Let's be spiritual. Let's apply grace. Let's apply grace. Let's apply mercy. Let's do this to the best of our ability. But that grace and mercy has to be for everyone, and we've got to be consistent. All right. So there we have it. All right. I'm actually finished this one, so I'm going to stop right now. Email me as soon as you can. newsif@yahoo.com. newsif@yahoo.com. That's newsif@yahoo.com. newsif@yahoo.com. Wow. The internet kept working for over an hour. So I'm going to stop right there. Everyone have a great night. God bless.